Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, our main speaker tonight is Herb.
Hi, my name is Herb and I am an alcoholic. Hi. I didn't know that on February 20th, 1984. On February 20th, 1984, the hospital in which my wife was incarcerated for her alcoholism asked me to quit drinking. She'd been there a couple weeks, and I had come there every other night, about 3 nights a week, with our 3 children, who at that time were 16, 12, and 10, 2 girls and a boy. And we were coming to support her recovery. That particular afternoon, I had stopped with my boss to have a couple drinks, taking him to the airport, as I did regularly. And then I went home and picked up the kids and went to the hospital. And of course, right away, they smelled it and they said, "Didn't you know that you weren't supposed to drink while she's trying to recover from her alcoholism?" And I said, "No, I did not." And they said, "Well, don't drink for 90 days. 30 days while she's inpatient and 60 days while you're in the outpatient program." And I said, "No problem." The next morning, and it was Tuesday, February 21st, 1984, I woke up in a state of tremendous panic, a sense of doom, a sense of overwhelmedness. I don't get feelings. Sorry. I'm way more educated than that. I'm way more developed than that. I'm way more developed than and evolved than having feelings and being controlled by my feelings. I have spent a lot of time educating this and repressing this consciously. I don't have feelings, and yet Tuesday morning, February 21st, 1984, I could hardly get out of bed. I did force myself to go to work. It was the first time. I love my work. I have a career of over 40 years. I love going to work. And I could hardly drag myself into the office. And that evening, I was very, very delighted to go to that hospital program to tell them all about my horrible feelings and day. And they said, because I'm in this little group that I now know as Al-Anon, but I did not know it then. It's the group of significant others in the hospital program. And I was telling them about my horrible day. And they said, "All right, so how are you getting along in the group?" And I said, "Well, you know, this group is pretty interesting. You know that I'm a trained therapist." I told the hospital director, "You know I'm a trained therapist. I have an advanced degree in psychology. I've had lots of therapy. And in fact, I've given lots of therapy. I've run groups myself. And the guy who's running this group is okay, but he really could use some of my pointers." And they said, "Well, that's really interesting. Why don't we gather a group of staff and talk about that?" And so they did. They gathered a group of staff, and they gave me 30 minutes to describe how I would run the group. And then at the end of it, they said, "Thank you very much, Herb, for sharing. Now remember, it's our fucking hospital." And I said, okay. And they said, how are you getting along in the group? And I said, well, I like the group therapy thing, you know, getting down on it and expressing yourself and getting those tears out and getting that anger out and all that stuff. I love it. But I don't really identify with those people in the room. You know, I really identify with the people they're talking about. I was being honest. I was really just coming from where I wasn't aware of what I was saying. And I said, I don't identify with those people, but I do identify with the people they're talking about. And the staff said, we know. They said, we have arranged for you to be moved from that group. This was all done without discussing with me, by the way. You got to know that. And without my permission. And they said, we are arranging for you to be in the men's stag inpatient group of alcoholics. You will be the only outpatient. Now, if there's any one word that absolutely underscores my recovery, it's the word willingness. I was willing to go to the hospital to support her recovery. I was willing to quit drinking on February 20th to support her recovery. I was willing to express myself honestly when I was staffed about the particular group. And when they suggested that I go to this other group, men, inpatient, alcoholics, I don't belong there, but I'll go. I was willing to do that. And in that group, when they asked me to do a first step, it's not our first step, but it's an approximation. I was willing to do that, and their request was, write out your autobiography of your relationship with alcohol. You hear how safe a question that is? Because here I am, I'm 43 years old, I have an advanced degree in psychology, I have an advanced education in theology, I studied to be a Catholic priest, I was a monk in a monastery for 7 years of silence from ages 17 to 24. I mean, I'm a heavy hitter, baby. And I said, all right, I'll write out the answer to that question. They did not say to me what they knew. You're an alcoholic, quit drinking, get real, stop the denial. They could have said that, and they would have chased me away with one of those. And what they did was ask me a very safe question. The questions are so much more important than the answers. The questions, if heard and accepted, will create an energy in us, in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls, that will bubble forward and allow us to come in contact with an answer that we never even suspected. And I began writing. My father, alcoholic. Oh, I had such a good time writing that paragraph because I was so angry with him. 6'4", 285 pounds, former military police, former street cop, bad drunk, very big, very powerful, truck driver guy. Came home every night when he came home drunk. I hated him. And then I began writing about my first drinking experience. I had not reflected on it. Here I am, 43 years old. I've gone through a lot of therapy, a lot of self-help, all of the kinds of self-help things that were happening in the 60s and 70s and 80s, because I'm a seeker. I really am, and I know it. And look, when I look over my shoulder, at 17, I went in the seminary Now, I was standing in front of a judge at 17, and he had a manila envelope like this, and he said, I'm 17, I'm standing in front of a judge, and I've got my parents behind me, and he said, Mr. Kagan, he says, I need to clarify something. He says, on the left-hand side of this file, I see that you're the captain of the football team, you're an A student, you're president of your class, you're president of the altar boys. On the right-hand side, I see you've had 3 arrests in 3 years. Drunk and disorderly, curfew, and a concealed weapon, and now you're up in front of me for grand theft auto, 17 years old. And I said, well, yeah, that's who I am. Yeah, I didn't see any conflict. I mean, I don't know whether you just saw it or not. But the right hand and the left hand don't match up for the same person, but that's who I was. And I didn't see any conflict. He said, well, I have just sent your running buddy, who you stole cars with, to youth authority for 2 years. He said, in this packet of information, there's an application for the Catholic priesthood. He said, and they've accepted you. So if you go there, you won't go to youth authority. I said, well, I planned on going, and I am going. He said, fine. So I was the only seminarian that had to call his parole officer. For a full year, once a month, I had to call a parole officer. Amazing. We cannot see until we can see, and we do not know until we know. I'm not being cute. I'm not being poetic. Mike, welcome. Are you still here? Yeah, great. First meeting. Wow, what a gift it is to come here looking for a solution. You're a seeker, see? All right? You might be desperate. You might have been driven here. All right? Unfortunately, I had a 502 in 1968 and another one in 1969, but in those days it was a ticket. And I just called my attorney, paid him $400, never even went to court, and it had no implications on my driving record or on my insurance. Amazing, just a ticket, reduced to reckless. They didn't do me any favors by cutting me that kind of slack. Today it's a lot more rigorous, which is good, because it makes us perhaps more conscious. In fact, I have a sponsor. His name is Lloyd. I've had him right from the beginning. This was one of his home groups, I recall, back some years ago when he lived in Manhattan Beach. He now lives in St. Louis. He retired and moved to St. Louis. And he's been my sponsor since I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. So when I was writing this answer to the first step question, what is your autobiography, your relationship with alcohol, I saw that I had a drinking problem. In 20 minutes, with the properly asked question that was received with an open mind and an open heart with some willingness, I began to write as honestly and as authentically as I could. There is something magic that happens, and you might want to try this. Dancing, anybody? You might want to try this if you're stuck someplace, if you have a decision to make, if you have some blockage in your soul, if you have some confusion in your mind. You might sit down and do some spontaneous, what I call spontaneous stream of consciousness writing. Allow your pen to touch the paper and not filter what comes out. Don't worry about the language or the spelling or the punctuation. Allow your heart to speak, not just your head, but your heart to speak and flow through the arm to the paper unfiltered. I call that spontaneous writing, stream of consciousness. And that's what I was doing when I was writing out this reflection. What is my relationship to alcohol? And after I finished with my father, and then I saw that I, in fact, had these drinking episodes, that regularly I drank all there was, and I got very, very, very drunk, knee-buckling drunk, and I blacked out, and I passed out, and then I threw up, sometimes just all over me, or sometimes consciously in the toilet before I would pass out, I thought, wow, I might have a drinking problem. And as soon as I said that, the hospital said, okay, go to a meeting. And when I was in a meeting, I raised my hand and said, I'm Herb. My very first meeting, Mike, I raised my hand and said, I'm Herb, exploring being an alcoholic. They did just that. They did. They laughed in a very, it wasn't at me. I knew it intuitively. It was a welcoming kind of connection, of identification. I didn't know any of that intellectually, but I knew it in my heart. I knew it in my soul. All right, and I came back the next couple weeks still exploring. And after you listen in the meetings and in the hospital program, I said, okay, I'm an alcoholic. But I identified that with all of the chaos in my life. The 12 and 12 has a line in there that just describes us. They call us children of chaos. Yeah, that's who we are. Usually coming from alcoholic homes. But be that as it may, and my father's an alcoholic, and both my wife's parents are alcoholics. And so we're children of chaos. So then once I said in the meeting that I'm an alcoholic, the meeting said, get a sponsor. So I called this guy Lloyd, who was Irish Catholic and in my business. Actually, we had a client relationship. He was a vendor of mine. But we had been drinking buddies. Outrageous drinking buddies. And I was really glad in 1973 when he went into the AA, whatever that was, because he was a bad drunk. Yeah, he was just falling down bad drunk, you know. What really hid it from me, and this may help somebody here, I am not a chronic alcoholic. A chronic alcoholic, and some of you may be this, it sounded like Mike might have been, and that is you have to drink every day, and every time you drink, you get drunk. My wife's story. The last 10 years of our drinking, she was my drinking buddy. She drank every day, and every time she drank, she got drunk. Not my story. I didn't drink every day, and every time I drank, I didn't get drunk. I could have a couple glasses of wine with clients and go back to work. I could have a couple scotches with my colleagues, my coworkers, and go home like I promised. I could go out with clients and host a dinner and order the wine and have a martini and have some wine and not make a jerk of myself and go home. Regularly I did that. But, and this is what I couldn't see, periodically, I would go to lunch with a client and have a couple glasses of wine and then not go back to work and not go home. Having intended to do both, go back to work and go back home. Or I would go with my coworkers down to the saloon to have a couple drinks, and I intended to be home at 7. I had called and said I would be home at 7, and I regularly was home at 7. And yet that night, I didn't come home till 3 in the morning, driving down the Harbor Freeway with my glasses off, with my hand over my eye, with my head out the window, trying to stop those lines from crossing, in a blackout, probably 1 or 2 times a week. But what hid it from me was this periodic. It didn't happen every time. My wife went to, in 1983, at the very bottom of our drinking, she went to Florida after Christmas for about a week or 2 maybe to visit some relatives, and I stayed home with the kids. And I didn't drink the entire time. At the holiday, I was off, on vacation, at home. Full liquor cabinet, didn't drink. Had no interest in drinking. I believe that's what hid it from me, so that even when she admitted she was alcoholic and she went into the hospital program and I'm getting all this exposure, I'm still not seeing it. You see, my head is different than normal people. Normal people would have figured that out. 1 + 1 makes 2. all right? A drunk driving in 1968, a drunk driving in 1969, 1 and 1. They were mistakes. I mean, the first time, definitely, I was exposed to expense account drinking for the first time, and I was immature. And the second time, I was just tired, and they were wrong. That was simple, yep, absolutely. Couldn't see it. And so when I responded to the meeting by getting a sponsor, my sponsor said, and the single most important act you can get, that you can do when you first come into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, even if you don't stop drinking, is to get a sponsor. Is to find, and that doesn't have to be a lifelong contract. It doesn't have to be, this is the guy or the gal that I'm going to be connected to for my life. No. Think temporary. Think temporary. I'm going to do something temporary because I need to figure out how this thing works. AA. I need to know about meetings. I need to know about the book that she so wonderfully thumped up here. Thank you for doing that. Thank you, and happy birthday. And what does it mean, these steps, and what does sponsor mean anyway? So many times I'll ask a person, so do you have a sponsor? And they go, oh yes, absolutely. About 30% of the people that I talk to don't have sponsors. But the ones who do, I say, oh, you have a sponsor, great. When's the last time you called them? Oh, 2001. Well, that's not a sponsor, that's a fantasy. All right? That's an ancient memory. Now, the people I sponsor, I suggest to them that they call me once a week and connect with me. All right? Now, if they connect with my machine, they'll get a call back. And that once a month that we visit, eyeball to eyeball, face to face. I don't mean just seeing each other in a meeting. I mean sitting, having coffee, sitting, having lunch, sitting, having dinner, sitting, having a conscious relationship and conversation. That's what sponsorship means. And some people tell me, oh my, I have a sponsor, but they're really busy and they don't return my call. That's not a sponsor. Or I have a sponsor, but I really can't do my fifth step with them because there are some stuff there that they just couldn't handle. Well, it might be an underestimate of the sponsor, and I suspect it is. But if, in fact, you don't trust your sponsor, or you don't have confidence in your sponsor, or you don't have a connection to your sponsor of transparency, this was my word given to me by my sponsor. He said, Herb, I want you to call me every day. Oh, yeah, every day. And I said, well, why would I do that? I just don't do it because you tell me, all right? I have to have a reason. And he said, well, because I'll fire you if you don't. I said, oh, good. I don't want to ask anybody else because I know you and I feel safe with you and you've been in the program for 12 years. And so if I call you every day, what will we talk about? Well, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I'm fairly well-educated, reasonably intelligent. I read English. These books are in English. Why would I need your help? This is my attitude. I'm a do-it-yourselfer. I figure things out. He said, yeah, you figured things out. You're in AA now, all right? He said, I want you to tell me what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what you're doing. I want you to tell me what you're thinking because your thinking is demented with 30 years of hard drinking. And you have no feelings. They've been anesthetized by 30 years of hard drinking. And your behavior is a function of demented thinking and no feelings. You're a train wreck or chaos, okay? And so I said, okay, I would do that. Now, he said, the goal of this relationship is for you to become transparent. I had no idea what he was talking about. Become transparent. I says, what does that mean? He says, I want your insides and your outsides to match. Well, I still really didn't know what he meant, but I understood the words, and I was willing to make an effort. And I called him every day, telling him what I was thinking, feeling, and doing, and most of the time I told him the truth. In the beginning, not all the time, because I didn't feel safe. I felt ashamed. I felt guilty. This was really none of his business type stuff. But today I can honestly say I'm transparent. I'm transparent with my sponsor, certainly. I'm transparent with my wife. We just celebrated 40 years of marriage. You can't get here from there. I've heard now, and after reading Appendix 2, I understand it, what a spiritual awakening is, what a spiritual experience is. And Appendix 2 in the back of the big book describes it as a change. A change in the way we think, a change in the way we feel, and a change in the way we behave. Now, I don't think my sponsor was smart enough or book knowledgeable enough to have put those two things together when he gave me that formula to talk to him in the beginning of calling him every day. But it is interesting that it's the same formula. He wanted me to tell him what I was thinking, feeling, and doing. And in fact, as I progressed in this program and as I did the work outlined in this book, our instruction book, our textbook, I began to be changed. Hear the difference. You see, from 17 to 24, I studied philosophy and theology in the seminary in order to get some information to help me deal with life. And then after that, I studied for 6 years psychology in order to get some information to help me to deal with me and life. And then in the 70s and early 80s, I dealt with life springs and S training, and hypnosis and transcendental meditation and hashish and cocaine. I was looking for that experience that Timothy O'Leary promised us. Didn't happen. It didn't happen. None of that self-help stuff. And I came into AA that way. You are not members of a fellowship of self-help. Now, it will help you. It has helped me. But it is not a self-help program. It is, in fact, a program designed for people who come here totally broken and at some point have to admit that they cannot do this thing themselves. That this is not about reading a book and working the steps and praying to God and working with others and going to meetings and having commitments and becoming the person that we want to become. All of that is necessary, and those are the basics. But if, in fact, you approached it like I did in the first 4 years, it was about, I will read this, I will do this, and I was a good AA. I went to 2 meetings a day, one at 7 in the morning and one at 8 at night, because I was really uncomfortable when I wasn't in the meeting, so I bookended my days with meetings. And when I'm in the meeting, I'm feeling okay. And in between the meetings, I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And you heard Mike talk about that. That unmanageability, that spiritual malady, and I had no idea. I'm in AA. I don't have alcohol. That was my medication. That was my solution, and it now has been removed, and I'm on my own. I have a sponsor, and I'm going to meetings, and I get a book, and I read it. That was his recommendation, my sponsor. Get a book and read it, and then he said, which was great advice, anybody here who doesn't have a book, get one. And then read it. Good idea. But he said, now work the steps. Good idea, but he didn't take it far enough. He said work the steps, assuming that I read English, I'm reasonably intelligent, this is in English, you figure it out. He passed on to me what had been passed on to him. And I said, okay, step 1, I'm in AA, I must be powerless. Look at the chaos in my life. Step 2, step 3, I'm a trained theologian. Give me a break. Step 4, oh, by the way, that was a fantasy. I'd had one course in theology, all right? Yeah, but you know how we do, get grandiose. I read a couple books and I'm a trained theologian. And so then I got to step 4 and I said, gosh, I can't figure this out. So I went to the 12 and 12 and I read that and it was less clear. I know now that 12 and 12 is a commentary. It's not intended to be instructions on the steps. It's a commentary of Bill's experience. He wrote it in the mid-40s, having about 10 years experience with this program and with these steps when he wrote it. It was intended to market the traditions. That was the purpose of the 12 and 12. They figured if they packaged some stuff about the steps along with the dry stuff about the traditions, they could sell the book. It worked. And so then I got the material from Hazleton, I got the material from the hospital, I got the material, 4-step material from the meetings. Oh, there's so many checklists and so many inventory, commentaries, and I got so confused I did nothing. And my sponsor said, do an autobiography. And I did that. I wrote out my life's story. All about the chaos, all about the drama, all about the behavior, all about the secrets, all about the guilt, all about the shame, which is not an inventory. The big book, now I know this, I didn't know it then, asks us to write out the exact nature of our wrongs, the underlying causes and conditions, our motives, our belief systems, and our values. Hello. What I wrote out was a script of behavior, and I didn't go underneath the behavior to check out my motives. So I was clueless when I came to my 5th step, although I did it, and I was clueless when I went to my 9th step, although I did it, and I went to say, Bob, I'm so sorry. I'm just so sorry. Mike, I'm just so sorry. Farsad, I am just so sorry. And it was a very sorry 9th step. Because that's all I did, was say I was sorry. Did I change? Oh, no. It never occurred to me to change. I wouldn't get what I wanted if I changed. I still had to be dishonest. I still had to be unfaithful. I still had to be insincere. I still had to be insensitive. I still had to be grandiose. I still had to be, and I know this word today, narcissistic. Look it up. It's an incredible description of self-centeredness. Narcissus is the Greek god who went to the lake, never having seen his image before, a beautiful young man of 14 or 15, and he looked in the lake to get a drink of water, and the lake was so still it was a mirror, and he had never seen his face before, and he saw his face for the first time. It was so beautiful, he fell in love with himself and stayed there staring and died of starvation. That's narcissism, all right? We feed on our own self so long we die, at least spiritually, and certainly psychologically, emotionally. So for the first 4 years, I was restless, irritable, and discontent in AA because I treated it as a self-help program. Even though I had a sponsor, going to 2 meetings a day, I had read the book, I had worked the steps, I was of service, I had commitments, I began to sponsor people, and because that's what I was told to do. Now, I think all of that kept me around until I was open, ready, and the seeds were planted and they began to flower in me. At about 5 years, I decided that it would be a milestone to make 5 years, and probably I should rework the steps because of that milestone. Now here's the grace. That was the first grace. Number 1, I'm going to rework the steps. Back in 1988, when I did this, oh, by the way, I've been sober ever since February 20th, 1984. when I had my last drink, and they asked me to stop drinking. It was a grace again. I did not know I was alcoholic. I did not think I had a drinking problem. I certainly didn't ask for it to be removed, nor did I make a decision to stop drinking forever. And yet on February 21st, I started my first day without a drink. That is accumulated to today. Now that won't be some of your stories, and it might even make some of you angry that it was so easy for me, because it was. It was a grace. This was removed from me, but my life has been a struggle since then, through till 1988, and I didn't know that I didn't know, and I didn't know any better. I just thought that life is hard, and I've been severely damaged by my family of origin, and I'm going to need a lot of therapy, and I'm just going to have to exert myself and make sure that my life is as good as I can make it for myself. All right? They call that unmanageability, the spiritual malady. Bill Wilson calls it the cancer of the soul. And I believe the untreated unmanageability, the second half of the first step, admitted we were powerless over alcohol. You see, alcohol was not my problem. It was removed. And the big book says alcohol is not your problem. Now, of course, if you're drinking or you're obsessed with drinking, alcohol clearly is your problem. But the big book says in two places, alcohol is a symptom and bottles are only a symbol. It is not the issue. The spiritual malady is the issue. The unmanageability is the issue. The extreme selfishness, self-centeredness is the issue. And it says on page 62 that it needs to be cut out. It needs to be removed, and that is a God job, and we can't do it. We're totally powerless over it. I'm paraphrasing. And then in the next paragraph it says, and we can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on our own power. And that's who I was. I was trying and wishing on my own power. With formal religion, with formal psychology, with all those informal self-help programs, including Alcoholics Anonymous, I was treating as a self-help program. And as long as I was doing that, I did not change. It did not connect to me. But in 1988, I had the grace to have the thought, I think I'll rework the steps. And the second thought is a bigger grace, and you've heard me talk about my being a loner. I said, I think I'll get a man to help me. Now, I didn't say I'm going to change sponsors. I liked Lloyd. He's my sponsor. He will always be my sponsor as long as we're alive and sober. He will always be my sponsor. He's a wonderful, wise, mature role model for me, sounding board for me, confidant, and now friend. But I had already done the steps with him, and I asked another man to help me. And he didn't become my sponsor, he became my step guide. And he took me through this big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, one step at a time. And in fact, in the first step, we broke it down into 3 component parts. What's wrong with my body? When I put alcohol in it, I drink more than I want to. What's wrong with my mind? When I stop drinking and I make a decision to stop drinking, and I have every reason in the world to stop drinking, and I go to a hypnotherapist for post-regression analysis, and I stop for 90 days, I start again. I can't stay stopped because I have a mental obsession over which I have no power. My body is broken. It does not successfully process alcohol. My mind is broken. It does not successfully process reality, especially about alcohol. And I didn't see this till I was 10 years sober, that my life had become unmanageable. A spiritual malady, a cancer of the soul, extreme selfishness, self-centeredness, and I cannot eliminate it. I must submit to this process. I am powerless, and I must find a power other than myself. And it can't be the God of my tradition and the God of my understanding and the God that I have grown up with for 48 years. I need a new connection. I need to be released from that death grip I have on old information and old experience, and I was given a set-aside prayer for that purpose. And as a result of working those steps, out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, over an 11-month period, I began in February 1988. I finished my 9th step, finished all my amends. I changed and I made retribution to those people who I had harmed, every one of them, every single one of them, by the end of December of 1988. I became aware at the end of December or sometime in January that I no longer was restless, irritable, and discontent. That my thinking had changed, my feelings had changed, my behavior had changed, and it had not been done by me, it had been done to me. Not self-help. A program in which we admit that we cannot help ourselves. We implode in a puddle of powerlessness. And we humbly and compassionately submit to a power other than ourselves that takes us to a place that I didn't even know existed. Today I have a spiritual life that I could only describe as flourishing. I have a personal God that cares and I'm connected to. Today I have a psychological, emotional life in which I have most of the time a sense of balance. And I have a sense of compassion for most people. And I have a sense of interest in helping. I have, in fact, a burning, yearning passion to carry this message to people because finally something worked. That's a spiritual awakening. Now, it was gradual. And that's the difference between what Bill Wilson had and what most of us have. Bill Wilson had the spiritual experience, that light switch that went on, boom. We mostly have the dimmer switch experience. It goes up a notch at a time and we're not even aware that the lights are getting bright until all of a sudden we can see. Now that's the good news, we can see. It's also the bad news. We can see. And many people have a first step experience of powerlessness and humble humility, humiliation, as they go through the balance of the work. I have a daughter who's 16 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have another daughter, 16 years in Al-Anon. I have a son who doesn't seem to have any issues, but knows where the answer is. My wife is 21 years sober. I'm 22 years sober. We have 6 grandchildren. And, under 6 years old, they were all there. Oh, chaos. But the only word I can use today for my life is that it flourishes, but one day at a time. I have stayed gently pressed up against this process and this program. And I've submitted to a sponsor, to a step guide, and to this book and its directions as best as I can. And as I lean into this, the Spirit then leans forward and gently brings me forward and changes me and takes me to a place that I never even knew existed. Come join us. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.